Hello and welcome back to another update. It is your host Swoop Union, and I'm back to my old beginning for this video because I want to start with something different. There are some numerous advances across the front, but History Legends reacted to a movie which was made by AP journalist about the battle for Andrivka to the south of Bakhmut during the Ukrainian summer offensive in 2023. The town of Andrivka, located here to the south of Bakhmut, was a town, wasn't very large. You can see here, completely ruined from the war. The southern satellite imagery updated, the northern one was not updated. But from this, we see that the Ukrainians wanted to regain control over the town during the 2023 summer offensive in an attempt to cut off the southern highway leading up to Bakhmut further north. This forest line west of Andrivka, about 2 kilometers long, is a forest line the Russians and the Ukrainians were fighting for weeks before the Ukrainians managed to gain control of it and recapture Andrivka, where they managed to hold on to the town for almost an entire year before the Russians recaptured it, but they failed to go beyond Andrivka. The movie, called 2000 Meters to Andrivka, is about a platoon that was tasked with the capture of the town. It was the 3rd Azov Assault Brigade. This platoon had the task to go through this forest line, reach Andrivka, and raise the flags of Ukraine and the Azov Brigade within it to celebrate the capture of it. So this platoon moves in towards the end of the battle. This is after weeks of fighting over this forest line. The forest line itself has a lot of trenches dug within it. Dug holes, foxholes, trenches, and a lot of trees being completely broken, as we can see from this older satellite imagery. This is an updated one following the battle, where the western one is during the battle. What we're seeing is that during this movie, I recommend watching it, especially if you're over 18 years old. If you're below, then I do not recommend it, as it is very brutal. So this movie happens weeks into the battles. This platoon, well, really, it's a squad that we are following from the start. They drop off their infantry at the start of the first line. The fields to the south and the fields to the north are completely covered with mines, minefields, and they are completely exposed as they are out in the open. This is during summer of 2023, actually towards the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, where drones were not used as much. This means that the Russians and the Ukrainians were mostly striking with artillery rather than drones. There were still drones, they were still being used both for reconnaissance and FPV drone strikes, but not at the scale that they're being used today. So the Ukrainians drop off the infantry at the start of this forest line. They do it in the fields as there is an elevation difference, allowing them to drop off the infantry in some of the trenches alongside the forest line, and then they are dropped off. Already at the initial dropping off of the infantry, there are some Russian soldiers firing at them. Some of them are actually hit while being dropped off within the first line, while others manage to get out. The vehicle gets stuck, and the Ukrainians are able to drop off their infantry. Some were struck instantly, some were killed, and others lived to push on. They continue pushing through, slowly walking through from one trench to another. Sometimes they engage in firefights with Russian soldiers that are alongside the forest line, and sometimes they do not see Russian soldiers for hundreds of meters. Once they reach about the 1000-meter mark, they have had one fire battle, mainly throwing grenades at each other. The Ukrainians had a squad. The Russians had just 3 guys fighting back. One of them was killed. Second was within a hole that they had dug into the ground, a bunker, where he ran out of ammunition, I believe. He said he would surrender, goes up, throws a grenade at them, and he also gets killed. The last guy is wounded, and he gets taken prisoner. Then they continue to the next fight about 500 meters from Andrivka. Their commanding officer gets shot and is killed. The first commanding officer before him was wounded and was sent back. During this battle, from the first 1500 meters, the Ukrainians lost approximately 10 to 12 people. And what we see from the same people, they killed about 3 or 4 Russians, which interestingly enough matches the 3-to-1 attacker-defender ratio that is standard for battles. So the Ukrainians slowly pushing forward. Once they reach the second battle, Russian soldiers run away from the trenches because heavy Ukrainian pressure, FPV drone strikes take place, and they're getting shot at by artillery and mortars. The drone operator sees that they are running away, connects and communicates with the forces, Ukrainian soldiers fighting, and tells them that they're running, and they start shooting after them. Whether they hit them or not, it never becomes clear. But what we do know is that the Russians were pushed back all the way back to the town. They managed to reach the outskirts of the forest line, and the entry until the exit from this forest line, it's 2 kilometers long. As he mentions in the movie, it's about 1 minute drive. It is 10 minutes of running in a normal day. But in this movie, it takes them 3 days from being dropped off at the entry. The first day, 1,000 meters. The second day, 500 meters. And the third day, the final 500 meters. They enter into Andrivka, go into a basement. They're hammered by Russian artillery. They go outside, raise the flag, and that's that. A almost 2-hour-long movie condensing 3 days of battles, including 2 firefights, a lot of artillery duels, 2 overnight stays, and an entry into the town to raise the flag after weeks of fighting. And that is the reality of this war. Now, I definitely recommend you go and watch that movie. This is a rundown of what happened on it. You can check out the entire movie on YouTube. You just have to search 2,000 meters to Andrivka full movie. You'll see it. I'll put it in the description as well. This is a re-upload because I could not really find the original one, so someone else had it re-uploaded just a day ago, but the movie was released in August of this year, so it took them 2 years to develop this movie. This is the sad reality of this war. We have now moved 2 years beyond this, and the war has only become much more brutal. My analysis from watching the movie is if they did the exact same thing today, well, the entire squad would have been wiped out within just a few minutes. And that just shows how dynamic the fighting is as well, and how the drones have completely changed the situation. Tactics have completely switched around. And this also shows exactly how crazy, really, it is that the Russians captured approximately 800 square kilometers here in the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk section of the front line, east of Uliepole, along the first and second lines of defense, within 3 months. And just exactly how many people are dying from this war every day. There is approximately 6 separate advances over the past 24 hours. From this, it would not be an exaggeration to say about 1,000 people would have died for it. And that is the sort of attrition we're seeing every single day. But what we're also seeing is that it is becoming more and more in favor of the Russians. The Russians at the very start had a significant advantage, but towards the first summer of 2022, the Ukrainians managed to gain an advantage by the sheer mobilization forces, the military aid received from Western countries, forcing the Russians to mobilize. This allowed them to even out the situation, but they still had an advantage in firepower. This was then evened out by Ukrainian use of drones. The Russians have now adapted and overcome the Ukrainian drones by completely outproducing the Ukrainians, both in manpower and in the number of drones being used. Where before the Ukrainians would have an entire squad in one forest line, 12 soldiers active at all times, well, now sometimes they have 2, sometimes they have 5. That is also an interesting thing from the movie, and that is whenever someone was injured or was killed, someone else came to take their place. When a squad took too many casualties, it would be rotated out. Well, if the APC got stuck or was destroyed, they are stuck until the next one comes around. Back then, it would allow them to survive if they sat in a hole, while today, drones will fill up that hole within minutes, and that is exactly why their frontline positions have become extremely dangerous. Evacuations barely happen anymore at the same methods and pace that it happened back in 2023. And the sort of massive operations that we saw back then is very difficult to pull out today. Instead, we see intense fighting over these forest lines, mainly being centered around drones fighting each other. And if they're able to detect the drone operators, that is when they're able to advance and push them back. As for the frontline developments, we'll have it in a second video. This one will be dedicated to the movie. And again, I recommend you go watch it simply to understand the reality of the fighting that is taking place throughout this war. There are many more movies out there about different battles throughout this war. All we can say is that I hope this war ends soon. I advocated it for it many times, and I really, really hope that this time around they find a deal and they end the war, because honestly, it was very depressing to watch. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.